Thanks for giving me an opportunity to talk here. Before we get started, I have to state this project's very much in its infancy, and at this point I'm more interested really in, I'm not going to present some great set of results or anything like that, but I want to spark a conversation. And I want to learn as much from you guys as you do from me about, if you have any wisdom or guidance you can give me about this project I'm about to embark on, that would be absolutely great as well. So before we get into that, a bit of background. You'll see the MACSYS logo up there. MACSYS is currently paying most of my salary. I'm probably on a fractional appointment. I do a bit of teaching here at UNSW as well. But I'm basically a biomathematician. MACSYS they've got this big dream of developing a whole cell model. It's going to kind of like, they want to do in silico biology. Okay, so it's this multi-university centre of excellence, and they've got about 7 years of funding. And one of the things, as far as it relates to my talk, of course, part of their remit is doing some community outreach. As I said, I'm a biomathematician. I work with Adele Costa. I did a PhD part-time here over about 10 years or something, or by the time I did the master's and the PhD. However, I always feel, I don't know if it's just imposter syndrome or whatever, but I actually think I'm not really a mathematician. Most of my working life I've actually been a high school teacher of mathematics. And in fact, up until about early 2023, that was the last time I was involved in high school teaching. I was employed as a high school teacher up until early 2023. So I have an interest in high school mathematics and what's happening there. Okay, because I'm a biomathematician, which of course is a specialised part of applied mathematics, I do tend to bring that kind of a focus to what I'm going to present to you today. And so I've developed some materials. At this point, they're kind of getting to the stage where I want to start deploying them to schools, but probably more for teacher professional development. Ultimately, I do want to go down the path of getting students working on stuff, and hopefully we can develop some more enrichment materials like that too. Okay. My kind of broader concerns, like why in particular am I doing this? I was, making these slides last night, and I was thinking about it. What in particular do I think that I'm going to value add that's maybe different from what other people do? And I was reading, I think we've all seen the statistics, and to be honest, the statistics are not getting any better. There's I think since when I was going through high school in the 1980s, they said 1 in 3 students that does 4-unit maths is female. I think that's still true. It was true back in the 80s. It has not improved. Numbers of people who are taking higher level maths are not increasing. The numbers of people who are finishing HSC has increased a lot since, over that 40-year span. But in a lot of ways, we're not really shifting the needle. We still have, as I was saying, only 1 in 3 of the people doing 4-unit maths is female. So we've got this persistent underrepresentation of some groups, despite the fact that people are aware of this problem for a long time. I actually feel, I don't have any data about this, but I feel access to higher level maths in regional and remote areas of New South Wales has, if anything, gotten worse, not better, since when I was in high school. Just from anecdotally, I feel this from talking to people who went to regional high schools, and they were able to access Extension 1 maths. Now, of course, you could always do Extension 1 maths online or via correspondence. It would be back in the 80s. But it's not the same as having an in-person maths teacher. And I do know people who come from, country areas who say, well, I didn't do 4-unit maths because my school didn't run class. I didn't want to do it, via correspondence or online or anything like that. And as I was saying, I think that situation has actually probably gotten worse over the last 40 years, not better. Okay, so when you think about these things, it is a bit depressing. However, what can we do about this? Well, this is kind of my idea of my contribution, however small it may be. I'm not suggesting that it's going to solve the problems or whatever. In the wider community, I'm not sure if this fourth point here about in the wider community mathematics is seen as leading to very narrow clear paths. I'm not entirely sure that that's still true. But certainly for a long time, people thought, if you do a maths degree, you can only become an actuary or a maths teacher. I think maybe with the, data analysis being much more of a sort of a in thing over the last 10 years or so. Maybe that's changed a little bit. I'm not so sure about that. But the important thing is that there's certain perceptions about, whether you're a maths person or you're not a maths person, and school students make up their minds about this thing a long time before they actually have any serious data that would be guiding that impression. So a lot of people are opting out who I think would be capable of doing mathematics. A lot of students are opting out long before they need to. Okay, so I was thinking, what's a different approach I can take to mathematical enrichment? Back when I was doing my PhD, I was actually involved in doing the UNSW Maths Enrichment Club, and that's a great thing. I think a lot of high schools, when they think of maths enrichment, they do tend to think of that sort of competition-style mathematics, that sort of IMO, AMOC, that kind of thing. And while I think that's really good, and it definitely does have a place, and if anybody's doing that kind of thing, I encourage you to keep doing that. I kind of think when you do those sort of things, you are, to some extent, just preaching to the choir. Because the kind of students that are coming along and doing that extra recreational mathematics or that competition mathematics are only the students who already fairly strongly self-identify as being, a maths nerd or a mathematician in waiting of some sort. So while I do think that's great, I'm kind of interested in more doing something, and also it's something that I know about, and having worked as a biomathematician now, I wanted to develop sort of alternative form of enrichment materials that can sit alongside competition mathematics, but maybe would appeal to a slightly different student subset. I'm always amazed when I tell people that I am a biomathematician. A lot of people it's kind of like, biology and maths, they don't make, they just can't figure out what it is that are you a biologist or are you a mathematician? Or if they think you're anything, they think you're something more like a biostatistician, I think. And I'm definitely not a statistician of any sort. But they kind of think of biology as being, the quote soft science that people who can't do maths but want to do science go and do biology or something like that. So I find there's lots of people who just have no idea how you can combine biology and mathematics together. In the materials I've developed, the emphasis is really on using mathematics as a tool to understand phenomena that happens in the real world. Okay, and a lot of it is about that sort of metacognitive stuff like assumptions, interpretation, reasoning. It's not about number crunching. It's not really about solution methods. A lot of the stuff I have done, I actually get Copilot to write me a little code in R that you can actually simulate, because to be honest, the model I'm about to show you doesn't actually have an analytic solution, I don't believe. And most of the models we deal with are maths engineering, certainly in biomathematics. Most real world models that you come up with do not have nice, neat analytic solutions that you can write down in terms of the sort of things you learn about in high school anyway. So I kind of want to, I'm doing this because I think it's fun and I know a bit about it, but also I'm trying to sort of broaden students' ideas about what actually doing maths is. Maybe they won't do things like, they won't be a mathematician to do this, but if you go to an engineering degree or something like that, I'm trying to give them a bit of a taster about what sort of things you might be looking at. So that's kind of my approach to doing it. At the moment, as I said, because I've just been working on this since the end of last year. But basically materials I've worked on are for mostly high school mathematics teachers who are teaching senior secondary courses, particularly people who are doing things like Extension 1, Extension 2. The recent, well, not recent, they're not that recent, but when they changed the syllabus about, 5-10 years ago, they did actually introduce quite a lot of components of biomathematics into the syllabus. But unfortunately, if you go and look at the syllabus documents, there's virtually no support there for the teachers. So, they had this whole new section on differential equations, and they specifically mentioned logistic growth as an alternative model of growth. And there's absolutely nothing about what logistic growth is. They have the definition of the equation, they've got the DE there, but just nothing about it, And I'm thinking sort of, as a biomathematician, that really gets to me, they could have done a lot more. So a lot of teachers sort of think, well, I've never seen this logistic equation thing, And in the last high school I was working at, I did actually give some sort of staff development about, what the logistic equation is and how I, as a biomathematician, would think about that. I've since realised, that, of course, the logistic equation has a whole a whole new life in statistics as well that we could learn about as well. That's not mentioned at all in the syllabus, but anyway. So I'm developing materials. I want to make them available. I've been talking to people at MACSYS. They're going to make some sort of repository. I think it's all got to be very much linked to stuff that you can actually do in the classroom. And if it's not materials that, teachers are very busy people, so we want to have stuff that they can kind of implement straight away without having huge overheads in terms of you have to go and do this or learn that. So my ultimate aim is to, as I said, at the moment, I've kind of developed some professional development materials, but I want to then also make things like, I decided to use Article because it's freeware, and so there's no, it's not expensive to use. But if we have some sort of code, worksheets, that kind of thing available where teachers can use that, that's what I'm hoping to do. So it's designed to influence classroom practice rather than be delivered by specialists. Yes, I can go out to a school, and I probably will be doing this because I want to give everything a bit of a test run in an actual classroom environment. But there's only one of me, right? I want to have stuff that the teachers can actually download and use themselves without having to get me come into it. Okay. So basically, they're designed to be sort of short enrichment activities with existing seniors in their classes, or optional modelling focused lessons. I'm not that concerned how teachers make use of the stuff. I'm trying not to be prescriptive. I want the teachers to take what they can use and adapt it to their own context. That's why I'm going to try and make as much material available as I can. Here's one example. This is kind of the thing that kicked me off in the first place. This is what we call a chemostat. That file green goop there is actually bacteria, or not necessarily bacteria, microbes, growing under controlled experimental conditions. We've got a magnetic stirrer, and it's maintained. It's got a heat plate, so it's maintained at a constant heat. And you can consider it homogeneous because it's always being mixed. And basically, the idea was some of our experimentalist collaborators that I work with at MACSYS were actually getting this very piece of equipment up and running. They wanted to know what happens if we take a sample out of our bioreactor, and the sample they were looking at was something like about 1.5 millilitres out of the thing that's 20 millilitres in total. So it's sort of 2-3 millilitres. It's quite a sizable percentage of what's actually in there, because that's what they need to sample. They wanted to know how long would it take to get back into steady state, because they want to sample it regularly and they want to get the system back to steady state. And that's why I originally started even going down this path at all. But then beyond that, I was thinking, well, this would be a good thing to turn into sort of like a high school outreach project. And the modelling task, I've set it up so we're getting the students to think like, okay, we've got two variables here. We've got some sort of nutrient coming in. We've got our microbes. How can these two things change? And that's what that stuff about sources and seeds is. Well, obviously the microbes can grow, but then also you can remove them from the reaction chamber. You're going to have nutrient coming in and also being consumed by the microbes. And when you set that up, what sort of system of equations do you get? As I was saying, the emphasis is on interpretation and reasoning, not formal solution techniques, because as far as I'm aware, this does not actually have an analytic solution anyway, and it's something you'd have to simulate. But then we sort of go on through and simulate it and have a look at what the various parameters in the model do and things like that. Okay. So I guess right at the back of all this stuff, what I've been sort of assuming is that students, and these are kind of my design assumptions when I develop these materials to begin with, I'm assuming that the students can engage productively with modelling ideas before they get to solution methods. And I'm kind of hoping that it will give them this kind of, well, why would we want to be doing that anyway? That's the kind of question I'm trying to address. Not so much this is what you need to know to solve this particular equation or whatever. I think interpreting your parameters and assumptions in your model, that's all about making the maths meaningful, being able to describe to other people. Some of the parameters in the model will be inherent to the microbes you're growing. Some, like for example, the nutrient concentration that's coming in, or the dilution rate, how quickly you're removing and bringing stuff in. These are things that you can control directly. The experimenters could directly control. I'm hoping that we can broaden engagement without weakening mathematical rigor. I believe teachers will use modelling tasks if they're flexible and low overhead, or at least I certainly believe the opposite of that. If the teachers have to put a lot of time and effort into it, they're not going to use them because they've got so many other things on their plate. It's probably not going to happen. And hopefully we can have some influence on how students think about what mathematics is for. Like I was saying at the beginning, with the competition maths, the kids who know they want to do maths, they already know they want to do that. I'm kind of trying to hook the other people who could do very well at maths, but maybe they're not sure. I'm trying to encourage them to persist with maths as long as you can, because I really think it does help. Even if you go down to the life sciences, there's so many areas in life sciences that open up. You've got a bit more of a mathematical background as opposed to somebody who just drops out because they thought it wasn't relevant or wasn't important or whatever. Okay, so this is where I'm going to throw it over to you people, where I value your guidance. Has anybody attempted any kind of similar sort of outreach project? And if you did, what worked? What didn't work? In your experience, where efforts like this tend to succeed or fail in real classrooms? And for people who maybe have a background in teaching, actually in high school, if you're a teacher encountering a resource like that or built on that, what would determine whether you actually used it in class?